Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Living on Blockchain. Today, we are speaking to Nadja Bester from AdLunam. She brings a wealth of diverse experience. She has been an entrepreneur, she's been a board member, an award-winning startup mentor, an international speaker, a podcaster, as well as a host for several events and panels. So the Future of NFTs is her podcast, and she does have a book coming out as well. AdLunam is an investment and startup acceleration venture that they have, and they are very focused on helping founders and doing fundraise and making the right connects. Despite the market being wherever it might be. So this was a wonderful conversation because I love I have to be a little biased here. I love speaking to women entrepreneurs, and not simply because they are women entrepreneurs, but because there are so few of them as it is. So it is always very refreshing to catch up with somebody who's been in the space for a long time and is really making a mark. So this is a very, very good conversation. A lot of insights around fundraising, around the kind of support that AdLunam brings, about NFTs, and just general advice on how to really make the best of this space. So I can't wait for you guys to hear this. Let's deep dive right in. Hi, Nadja. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to me today. How are you doing?
Hey, Tarisha, very well, and you? Happy to be finally be able to catch up. I think we've been talking for a while to get this done, and I'm happy that we're finally doing it. So looking forward to an amazing conversation.
Absolutely, likewise. I think Web3 is always on, and there are so many variables that are in play when you're scheduling a call with somebody who's on the other side of the world. But I'm glad that we could make the time, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful conversation as well.
And we always say that Web3 never sleeps, but then when
Exactly.
it doesn't sleep in the bear market, then I don't know what to call it when the bull market arrives, because then there's no sleep.
Yeah, absolutely no sleep. Yeah, that is absolutely true. But yeah, Web3 is not for beginners. You can like
I
that
mean,
particular
we have
meme.
to work hard to make it easier for beginners to join us. Otherwise, we're going to run out of old timers.
Absolutely, yeah. People are going to run out of steam, right? Because for how long can you perhaps, be on always on the go? So I completely concur with you there. But Nadja, for our listeners, I know a lot about you and have followed you for a while with the work that you've done so far in Web3. But just for our listeners, can you tell us a little about your background as an entrepreneur? You're a board member in several places, advisor, and you've won several awards. So can you perhaps give us a little background about yourself and also perhaps share some key milestones that have shaped your journey in blockchain and crypto?
Yeah, I think this is always the most difficult question to answer
Hmm.
because you never know quite where to start. And, every person's journey is so
Unique.
uniquely individual to them.
Yeah.
But I'll give a brief rundown of kind of how I came into Web3, because I think it's very important always to highlight that no one has a linear path, generally speaking, but especially when it
Hmm.
comes to this industry and to technology in general, cutting edge technologies. We read the books about the Silicon Valley greats, and we think that's the roadmap to get places. But it's so easy in this industry that we are in to find an entry point pretty much anywhere. So
Right.
mine looked like this. I had been working in what was at the time called the digital marketing industry. I mean, of course, now many years later, we don't call anything digital marketing anymore because marketing is
Yeah.
always digital, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
at that time, I had run a digital marketing agency early 2010s. So I was very used to working with people in a context where I knew what the technologies of the future were going to do for business, but my clients didn't necessarily understand.
Right.
I had very many conversations with business owners where they said, I don't see the point of having a website. I don't need to get on social media because no one's going to message me there. And of course, we know that this has shifted tremendously since. But
Yeah.
and there's a lot of parallels here with Web3, of course, in terms of being early. But so
Hmm.
I've gone on from being in the digital marketing agency space to working for a pharmaceutical company. So I was head of multimedia marketing and communications for top 50 global pharma. Very different environment because, of course,
Right.
heavily regulated, and every single word that you put out there has to go through the regulatory approval team's process. And so didn't feel that even though the technology was offering all these possibilities, that the industry that I was in supported the evolution of how we do things. And again, we are seeing parallels today in the Web3 space, where it's this divide between, okay, how do we push max innovation while at the same time there are governments wanting to regulate, and sometimes they need to regulate because we also see what happens when they don't.
Right.
So I'd worked in the pharma industry and just, got to the point where I realized this is not for me. So my son and I started traveling. I
Right.
took what I at the time called early retirement, which is really funny looking back now because I couldn't sit still for even a
Right.
minute. So there was no
Yeah.
retirement for me. I was very bored very quickly. And
Hmm.
then I got the opportunity to learn about blockchain, but as I said, in a very particular way. Got offered the opportunity to work as a journalist. Now, I'm a writer. I love writing. I'd worked as a journalist in school, but I'd never actually, pursued that path professionally and never thought that I would. It wasn't something that I wanted to do as a career. However,
Hmm.
I had time on my hands. I was traveling and great, but I also want to do something with my mind. And so when I started writing about blockchain, of course, I had to do tremendous amounts of research. And the more I researched it, the more I understood that there was a clear divide of pre-blockchain and
Hmm.
post-blockchain. So
Hmm.
it's almost as if there had been a dimensional shift in the way that the world is able to look at certain things. And so from there on out, I say that I was completely sold. Um, I truly saw that there are possibilities for solutions to problems
Right.
that we face, whereas we had always been told that those problems were not solvable.
Right.
And that's why I've been in this industry for the past 7 years plus. I don't think I'll ever leave it. So
Hmm.
in this space, I've done also a broad number of things. So fractional CMO for different Web3 companies. I had a Web3 communications agency. This was in the ICO days, which was really crazy. If you think
Yeah.
you've seen hype in Web3, you ain't got nothing on that period. I mean, it was
Absolutely. I
a
agree.
it was an interesting period, but I'm glad that we've matured and we continue to mature. And then
Yeah.
I also have been advising a lot of companies over the years, investing in companies. And then 2 years ago, Jason Fernandez, my co-founder, and I started AdLunam. We'd worked together before, wanted to bring some new solutions to the industry's problems. And then our co-founder, Lawrence Hudson, also joined us. And the rest is history. Very, very happy to be building something in the space and working with incredible people, both our team as well as all the partners that we have, and really just being part of seeing Web3 grow from strength to strength, because we
Yeah.
all know what the media covers about Web3. When Bitcoin price is high, it's the best industry in the world because it's the future. As soon
Right.
as the Bitcoin price drops, no, this is all a scam, this is a bubble, it's all over, let's go to the next thing. But when you work in the industry and you deal with people on a daily basis working to create that future, I think you have a very different understanding of what this future might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you've seen a few cycles, like, you and I both have, and been in the market for the long term, you realize that there is nothing like building for the short term in Web3. You're either here for the long haul, or or perhaps it's something that you're trying out, and then you lose heart and you give up. But I always think that there is no way that you can perhaps be like a short-term builder, because those are people who are experimenting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in order to really build something that sustains, you have to survive these multiple cycles.
I think another important point to what you said, which is very, very important. I think what you're highlighting is key and crucial. You cannot build in a short span of time, even though it
Right.
might look like that, like
Yeah.
as if it's possible. Because if
Yeah.
you look at this industry in a bull market, decisions get made in the wink of an eye, and you can go from zero to a couple of million in just a few days. I mean, that's what happened to us when we were raising funds. We raised $1 million in 24 hours. We closed a 2.5 million funding round in 5 days. I mean, it was incredible to see, just from a personal perspective as a founder, the movement. I've seen this with other startups that I've worked with as well. I mean, over the years in these different bull cycles. But the problem with this is the sustainability of the industry is severely compromised when that's the only way that people evaluate this industry. So whether if I'm a retail investor, for example, or if I'm simply a user of Web3 products, although, I mean, I'm sure we'll speak about this. There's not so many Web3 users just yet. And of course, there's many reasons why, and we need to work on making that easier for people to making it easier for people to onboard. But if you're a retail investor and your perspective of crypto, of Web3, of blockchain is a short term, okay, I'm going to put in a couple of money today, and then in a couple of days or weeks, I'm going to 10x. If that's your perspective of the industry, it will always be the kind of industry where short-sighted decisions are made. And in a good market, you know, when there's a lot of liquidity, of course, you can make a lot of gains. But the more you know and understand about this industry, the more the decisions, the investment decisions that you make are more well-informed, understanding what the opportunities are as well as the limitations. Because I think, you know, when we talk about protecting people in the industry, we who are professionals, we know how difficult it is to do very basic things, you know, using a wallet. I mean, if you're doing transfers, there's so many things, even though you might know what to do, there's so many things that can go wrong. But because we are, let's say, on more familiar terms with what all of this means and how it works and who to ask for help, it's easier for us. But for the average retail investor, it's almost a dangerous place to be sometimes. And I think really when it comes to, you know, talking about Web3, then we always need to keep in mind, okay, but what we have today is not what we should have tomorrow. We probably will be repeating a lot of the mistakes that we've made in the previous bull market. We'll repeat them in this market again. But I do believe that as time goes by and more people who survive cycles, especially founders who have survived cycles, then make better decisions for themselves, for their team, for their project, and of course for their investor community.
Absolutely, I completely concur. I think experience everywhere kind of works out for the better, makes your decision making even more, it becomes more nuanced and more enhanced because of the experience that kind of adds to it. And that the same thing goes for Web3. But in Web3, because the cycles are shorter and the learnings are greater, I think if a founder is really able to survive multiple cycles, then that is the founder that I'd put my bet on.
Yes, and I mean, just a general rule of thumb for me is when I meet people during a bear market, especially founders building projects during a bear market, I make a mental note that those are the people to watch very closely as the market returns. Because I have met people over the past, let's say, 2 years of this cycle that we've been in, and it's been very difficult to get funding. It's been very difficult to get community traction. It's been difficult to get pretty much anything done. And despite all of this, the drive and the passion and the determination they have to make their vision a reality have seen them gone on to, incredible feats that is not so easy in a market like this. Compare that to if a founder comes in when the money is flowing and, everything is at their fingertips. That's great. But you also have to understand, especially if you're evaluating projects, what is the background experience of these people on the team in Web3? Have they been through a cycle like this before? Did they, it's not a question of surviving in the sense sometimes startups fail. But what happened? Did they pivot to something else? Is that pivot something that makes more sense for the market we're in? So you can actually tell a lot about a startup simply by looking at the team and especially the founders, of course.
Absolutely. I think they're the ones who are driving that vision. And ultimately, founders with the right kind of experience and the right kind of skill set are the ones who are able to really create a sustainable business. And that is what we need, I think, in Web3. We need more sustainable businesses, and that doesn't mean that you have to be perhaps making money from day one, obviously, but that is ideal. But at least perhaps you're choosing the right path, and as we kind of talked about, you're building for the long term.
Exactly.
So now moving on to AdLunam, can you tell us a little about, as a co-founder there, how does the platform leverage your wealth of experience to make like something, just impact on crypto projects and startup acceleration? Because that is what you guys are doing. And how can perhaps startups who are looking to get the relevant help get in touch with you? And is there like a criteria of selection that you guys have?
So in short, yeah, very good question, multi-pronged question. So I'll go through them one by one. So first of all, what exactly we do? So we are a Web3 accelerator and investment ecosystem. Now that's quite a mouthful. So let's look at the different components of this. First of all, we primarily specialize in fundraising.
Okay.
So we, as a company, I mean, our objective is to fundraise for clients. Sometimes that involves very often it involves of us ourselves also investing into these companies. But so we have an investor network on the institutional investment end, and then we have a community of retail investors on the retail investment end. So I'll go a little bit into what each of those do, and then at the same time also weave in the experience that we bring to the table and really why we started AdLunam exactly for this reason. So
Right.
firstly, on the institutional side, so I mean, getting funded in Web3 is, depending on the market cycle, either a massive issue or not an issue at all. When there's a lot of money, a lot of liquidity in the market, in a peak bull market, let's say, almost anyone gets funded. It's not always the kind of funds that everyone wants. I mean, there
Yeah.
are types of institutional investors. There are VCs that you very much would like to invest in you, and there are VCs that, if only you knew, perhaps you would not have had put them in your cap table. Now, for founders entering the Web3 space as a founder for the first time, because I think even if you have been in the Web3 space, but you haven't founded a company yourself, it's a different ball game looking kind of from the outside in, even if you have been part of an executive team, but really being the founder and being the person to make all of those decisions, that's a different story altogether. And
Right.
oftentimes founders in Web3 have not been founders in other industries outside of Web3. Now, that's not an issue because this is a horse of a different color, but at the same time, not 100%, because there's a lot of wisdom and learning and best practices, from traditional industries that
Absolutely.
either we still practice in Web3 or they are missing, and we see the quite negative results of them not being there. So for founders in the Web3 space, it's incredibly important to be in an environment where all the ingredients that contribute to their recipe for success is present. Now, that is an easy thing or it's a difficult thing, depending on a number of factors. As much as Web3, for example, is very democratizing, if you find yourself in a city like Dubai or Singapore or, let's say Paris, where there's also a lot happening now, if you find yourself in these major hubs, you will make a lot of connections, of course, if that's something that you're aiming to do. However, if you are on a different location, perhaps it might not be so easy to go to meetups and meet the right people. And of course,
Right.
even meeting the right people at meetups, that's a lot of work. You
Yeah.
don't know if the people that you want to meet or if you need to meet are going to be at specific events. So it's quite a hit and miss, but of course you can do all of this yourself. However, the smart way to do it, of course, is to partner with companies specializing in exactly what your needs are. So this is really for us where AdLunam then came in, is we act as, let's say, a middleman between what the startup needs. And we typically start working with startups in their early stage round. So they might have raised angel investment or seed investment, and they're now getting ready to go into the VC investment in the private sale, etc. Sometimes we do start working with them earlier on if they are very promising, because we do put them, of course, through quite a rigorous due diligence process. I mean, of course, we can only start working with them if we have sponsors giving prizes to the investor to the startups participating. We also take startups on an investor road in the startup, in the public sale of the startup. And there also we co-launch projects with other launch pads. So we are connected and partnered with a number of the top 10 launch pads. And so also goes for centralized exchanges, for market makers, for a wide range of other partners, media, press, etc. So really, it's a full house service in terms of getting a startup connected to anyone that they need to be connected to, as well
Right.
as getting the funding they need, both institutionally and retail investor.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think because being an entrepreneur myself, I understand the kind of challenges that come in the way of entrepreneurs when they are fundraising. It becomes like a full-time job. And for you to be able to lend a helping hand, make the right connects, that can really go a long way as well. So if a startup perhaps wants to enlist your services and want to get involved in your ecosystem, what would that process look like?
So we just officially launched. We've been unofficially working with projects in the accelerator during the bear market, but we've officially launched and opened it to the public on the 9th of February, so just a few days ago. So typically what happens is, as I said earlier, we have quite a strict due diligence process that we follow. So as soon as a startup makes contact, expresses interest, we will be requiring some documentation, some forms to be filled out. And then we go through this due diligence in order to make sure that it's a good fit in terms of the network that we have. We would, as I said earlier, we wouldn't easily take on a new client in terms of fundraising if we don't believe that our network of investors will have the appetite to fund this project. Just to manage expectations from the beginning. And then once we do start working with a startup, we are heavily invested ourselves. So their success really becomes our success. We take tokens. So we are fully invested in ensuring that the startup sees the success that it needs to, because as I said, their success is our success. And then just to finally answer your question about kind of why this came about. So all three of us co-founders have been working with startups in the Web3 space for years. So we've all been working with them as advisors, as part of different companies, working in different capacities. So we've really seen and experienced what it's like to build a Web3 startup through so many different lenses. And the one thing that when Jason and I were discussing AdLunam in the initial stages was, how can we support people using really simple, easy solutions? The concept of a launchpad, something that I find quite interesting is people are often not familiar, even if they work in the Web3 industry, they are often not familiar with what it is unless they need one. When you need one, that's when you start understanding, okay, this is a launchpad, this is what it does, this is how it works. But then because there are so many launchpads out there these days, you don't always get the same quality support from each and every one of them. There are some launchpads that will not speak to you unless, you have 50,000 followers on Twitter. So it's also incredibly important to, as a founder, to discern who are the people that you will allow to guide you. Because the problem I find with Web3 is the principle, the ethos of Web3 is everyone is helping each other. However, very often when founders find themselves in this crucial period of, institutional fundraising all the way to public fundraising in the IDO, that they become the prey for the predators in the industry. So there's a lot of people offering to help. There's a lot of people asking founders for things, but not really giving back. And so unfortunately, a lot of founders, as we've said, have not been founders before. Maybe they are even new to Web3 and they've never been a founder before. And so there's so many challenges that already are coming their way. So how can they make sure that they have the most valuable, up-to-date information, guidance, and support at their fingertips. And that is what a launchpad is supposed to be. It's not always the case, but we definitely pride ourselves on the fact that that is exactly what we offer startups. What we needed is what we offer.
That's brilliant. I think that is how best of the solutions kind of come about, right? When you are building something that you feel the need for, and your peer group also requires that you see a real need, and um, that is how I think sustainable solutions are created that actually really add value in entrepreneurs' lives, because there are solutions dimes a dozen. But what if you had to sum it up, perhaps in one line, the USP for AdLunam, what would that be?
Definitely fundraising accelerator. We call
Okay.
it the Zero to IDO accelerator. So we help with pretty much everything that you need to go from initial fundraising all the way up to launch, at least launch in the IDO aspect of the word, when the token launches, the TGE.
Right.
Then we also have the launchpad aspect of it, where we have an engage to earn platform with a proof of attention allocation model, but that's quite specific to retail investors, although it does also greatly support startups. Because what we essentially do through the platform, it's a gamified solution. So when people are engaging on the platform, projects are then able to identify who would be a good micro influencer, who would be a good ambassador, etc. And so then instead of the IDO itself being this black box where you have no idea who is investing in you, are they going to dump your tokens as soon as they can? It's then easier for projects to allocate their marketing spend to particular members of the community, as well as allowing these people also to invest, whitelisting them and ensuring that they get the investment because they are already invested in the project.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think you've kind of summed it up in a very effective manner, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening to this would, be able to find a support. As I said, fundraising becomes like a full-time job when you do get into it, and then the product suffers, and you do need like a helping hand there that can support you in that endeavor and make sure that it doesn't become too perhaps too tedious for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would also point out here that I think if you've never done fundraising before, you might find that it's something that you naturally excel at. I don't think that's the experience that the average person has, because if you've not been exposed to this side of business before, or even this side of yourself, there's a lot of growing pains, there's a lot of learnings that need to take place. And it's very easy also to lose heart, because if you are constantly either hearing no, which actually is
Yeah.
easier than just being ignored, people are gonna get back to you, but they never do, or you send out outreach and then no one ever hears, or you never hear back from them. I mean, that is probably one of the worst experiences to have, because you know what you're building, you believe in what you're building, but it feels like you're standing in the void and there's no one there, and is anyone else still alive at this point? So I think it's
Yeah,
not a pleasant experience to go through. And what often
absolutely.
happens, and this is something of course that founders need to guard against, because it's easy to then not only start losing heart, but to also think, well, maybe I'm not the best person for the job, maybe I'm not
Yeah,
capable of doing this. And
yeah,
often the reason that this might even be true is because you simply don't understand what the best practices are in order to prepare for success. Now, on the
absolutely.
internet, there's a lot of information about how to approach investors, how to speak to VCs, how to pitch to them. I can promise you that the rules in Web3 are different enough from the traditional venture capital industry that you need to understand the nuances of how to work with, how to speak to, how to approach VCs in this space, because they look for very particular things. So again, you might not be having success, and that's not because you are the problem, which is easy for us to internalize, erroneously, but it's
Mm,
because you need a greater understanding, and often that comes from people, of course, who have done this before, or in our case, we do this all the time, and so we know what's very current in terms of what VCs are looking for.
absolutely. I think What you said right now, I think that is something that will tug at the heart of a lot of entrepreneurs who are building, because it's easy, as you said, to internalize this, and you feel like perhaps you're not the right person building the solution. But at times, see, expertise is required, right? I think in every job, some kind of expertise does take you further from, say, you reach 0 to 1, but to really scale, how do you move forward? And to do that, you do need a helping hand. That's why people, get the help of mentors and advisors. And what you are providing is actually very actionable, very tangible, and that will help entrepreneurs. And I've been an entrepreneur for nearly 13, 14 odd years. So I understand that what you're saying when you say that, okay, you might not be perhaps doing the right things to get the requisite results with vis-a-vis fundraising.
And also, just to add to that, I mean, if everyone cannot excel at everything, even if you are
Absolutely.
one of those people that you are naturally good at everything you do, as a founder, there's not enough hours in a day to be excellent at everything.
Uh,
What are the biggest wins for me on a long-term basis? So,
yeah.
for example, it's much more important to learn how to effectively manage a team, since as a
Mm.
founder, you will always be managing teams, than it is to become the the industry leading expert at fundraising if you are only going to need that for a few months at a time, a couple of times in your startup's lifespan. So it's also really important to discern, when do you personally need to improve your skills. I mean, of course, we always all should be improving ourselves, but then there's a difference between a skill that is going to serve you for several years or decades into the future versus a skill that perhaps it's easier to outsource to experts, in the
Yeah.
sense that by working with them, you will be improving your skill anyway, but you'll at the same time ensure that you'll get the delivery that you want, the results that you want, as opposed to trying to DIY everything and not being sure if there is going to be a positive outcome.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I can't concur more. I think this is very well put. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, as I said, would take heart that, you guys have so much clarity in what you are providing. You're actually adding tangible value to the journey of the entrepreneur who's basically out there trying to build their vision. So more power to you guys. Now, for AdLunam, what perhaps would be like the next big milestone for you guys?
So definitely our own launch of our token, something that
Hmm.
we're looking forward to, but at the same time, it very much depends on the market itself. So
Yeah.
as a launchpad, of course, our business is to launch projects, and it has been an incredibly painful market for a lot of projects. I'd say most projects over the last 2 years. We were in touch with a good number of projects 2 years ago that 1 year ago had completely fallen off the map, and
Right.
fast forward another year and even those projects are no longer, so I've seen a lot of shifts in companies over this very difficult period that we've been in. Of course, it's difficult if you are not funded, it's difficult to keep on building. Everyone can't bootstrap in the same way. But so for us, we've been ready to do our own IDO for a really long time. Almost as soon as we launched, it was very, very ironic how the market turned extremely quickly, and we've been waiting with bated breath ever since. But at the same time, I think that this market that we've just come through has just been so good for us as a company. We've been able to build out an incredible network of partners that, yes, it would have been possible in a bull market, but there are so many things happening in a bull market that only when you have the time to really sit down, evaluate, why are you doing this? What do you need to do? And especially those key pivots, right? So for us as a company, definitely the IDO is one of our major next milestones. But then I would say on a daily basis, I mean, because we work with projects and they are all in varying stages of readiness. It always feels like there's some or other milestone happening on a daily basis. So it's quite fun. And then,
Hmm.
of course, another milestone that we also have coming up. I host the podcast, The Future of NFTs. And
Right.
we will be releasing, I will be publishing a book this year, The Future of NFTs. And then we are launching our collector's edition of the book at Token 2049 in Dubai in April. So very much looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, being in this industry means there's always milestones around the corner. And that's what makes it very rewarding and very enriching to be here, either your own or the people that you care about and work with.
Absolutely. I think there is always something happening, and these are very exciting developments that you have going on for your podcast with the book. Can you, I'll talk about that a little bit as well, but can you tell us a little about the native token that you're talking about for AdLunam? Like, what would be the utility there, and when are you? As you mentioned, obviously the market conditions reign supreme there on deciding the timeline. But is there a timeline that you're looking at? For the IDO, and what would be the utility of the token?
So the token is Lunam, the Lunam token,
Hmm.
and the utility, of course, as a launchpad, typically how it works is,
Right.
let me use a little example, maybe that'll make it easier. So if I want to invest into, let's say, Project Cup, since I see a cup in front of me, very creative. So I wanna invest in Project Cup, and the only in the public sale. And the only way to do so is to go where the sale is taking place, of course. Now,
Right.
previously, that would happen on the project website itself. That was the ICO, or initial coin offering days. Thank goodness we've put that behind us, because that was really easy for people to get scammed and rug pulled. And
Yeah.
I mean, I
Absolutely.
saw this firsthand many times over, and had nightmares about how scary and unsafe this industry is. So we've evolved from that into an IDO, an initial DEX offering, which is what takes place on a Launchpad website. Now, the utility typically of a Launchpad website would be that in order for, let's say, Jane to invest into Project Cup, they would need to own Launchpad tokens, and then they would
Hmm.
stake those Launchpad tokens in order to get the allocation for Project Cup. So that's a typical way of how it works. We do have different types of engagements with that token. So we have the proof of attention allocation mechanism that functions slightly differently from staking the tokens. But I'll keep it high level for now. And then the other question in terms of when are we looking at launching? So I think this is
Hmm.
the question on everybody's lips, especially
Right.
those of us who have been watching the market like a hawk for several years now, wondering when that golden moment is going to arrive. So I think, and this is of course not financial advice, but I think predicting what might happen this year, I think that once the Bitcoin halving takes place, we are definitely going to see, because just based on historical trends and data, we will be seeing a rise in the Bitcoin price. And then once the Bitcoin price, which is already, I mean, it's already growing by the day. I haven't checked it today, but I know at some point yesterday it was, I think, 52. So
Hmm.
it's climbing quite rapidly. And then once that happens, once the market is like, okay, now is the time, of course, that's when the altcoin season then kicks off again. And that's when you'll see a lot of different projects launching. And so probably that would be the timeline for us as well, because our launch is very much dependent on how many projects are willing to launch on a continuous basis. So if we have
Right.
our IDO and then projects are still waiting to launch, there would have been no value for us, and of course, no liquidity for our token once we launch, which is why we've been holding out on that.
All right. Yeah, that is sensible. I think market conditions kind of do dictate, and it is again like having a token, managing the token becomes a
A
very big
full-time
part of
job.
what you're doing. Yeah, it becomes a
Yeah.
full-time job, right? And when it's out there, it's out there. There is nothing. There's not much that you can control from your end. There are certain aspects, obviously, that are outside the ambit of your control, and timing it, I think, is everything. So, I am rooting for you guys. I've seen you work and Jason work for a long time. Jason, so I've been following for the longest time, and really, really excited for what you guys are building. And especially, all my wishes. I think, what you're building with the kind of clarity that you have, like I mentioned before, is going to be fabulous for upcoming entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are just starting out.
Thank you. And I think it's going to be an exciting time up ahead. The other reason why it's going to be exciting is previously Web3 was mostly populated by degens. And I think in this bear market, in this bull market, of course, we saw that during the NFT hype of 2021, where a lot of new people came into the space. But then, of course, we all know what happened. You know, the bubble rose to the top, and then someone took a needle and prick, and then the whole thing fell flat. And
Yeah.
so, similar to how NFTs are now having to prove themselves beyond, you know, PFPs and beyond art, I think what is happening in Web3 this cycle around is that there are so many traditional people, and I'm saying traditional in the sense they come from traditional industries, and that's every industry except Web3. They are not degens, so they don't do things in the same way. They don't think in the same way. So I think what we are going to see this season is that everything is going to be different. Perhaps some things slightly different, perhaps other things very different. But I think we'll see a shift in how marketing and communications are done, in how projects work on delivery, because of course in the previous market that was the number one complaint. Projects get
Yeah, not
funded,
delivering.
and then
Yeah,
as
and
soon
then
as
not
they
doing
get
anything.
funded, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of spoils the ecosystem for everybody, right? Like it obviously it tarnishes the image that people have of Web3 as it is, and then it kind of makes it a bad situation for even though entrepreneurs are coming in perhaps with a good intention.
I think that's why it's so important to build your network in the industry, because
Yeah.
there are pockets within Web3, and whether you are working in Web3 or you are only investing in Web3, whether you are building in Web3, I mean, each of these categories have their own subset of pockets. But I think if you are able to move between them, I'm very fortunate to be able to do this. I speak all over the world. I mean, I meet many different people in the space. So I've grown to understand that there's so much more to this industry than just what the average person understands. If you look at the media, if you make assessments based on the media, you might get one impression of Web3. If you are on Twitter, you'll get another
Yeah.
impression. If you're on LinkedIn, you get a completely different impression. So I think it's important, if you are at all involved in this industry, to expand your network as much as possible. There are so many opportunities to meet new people. There are so many opportunities to get involved, more than any other industry that I've ever been in, and more than any other industry that anyone I've ever spoken to who is now in Web3 have been in previously. So I think we
Yeah.
have an incredible opportunity to build our own careers, to build our startups that we are working on, or if we simply want to invest, to make sound investment decisions, even though it's a high risk investment category, but to understand what are the important factors to look at when making these decisions. And I do think the space, yeah, I mean, of course, we're going to see the same FOMO, the same hype, the same greed that we always see. But at the same time, I think there's a foundational aspect of Web3 that is maturing. And a lot of this is because, as I said, people are coming into the industry wanting to use the technology, but not wanting to be a degen and not wanting to get involved with, you know, the media hype. Let's put it that
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. So now, you mentioned about how, I mentioned your advocacy work and how you write and, you talk at all of these conferences, you talk about Web3 and, all of this, and you have extensive experience with that. And that kind of brings me to your podcast, which is around NFTs, right? And I would love to understand from you, what are the kind of trends and insights have you gained, and or observed basically in the NFT space, and how do you see it kind of evolving in the next few years?
Yeah, great question. I remember when we started the podcast, and I didn't quite understand the hype about NFTs. I'm not someone
Yeah.
who collects NFT art. I'm not interested in PFPs, but that was the dominant conversation that everyone was having. And
Hmm.
I wanted to gain a deeper understanding because the technological aspect of things, I understood that this is something, but I wanted to understand why is it something. And the
Hmm.
best way for me to learn is always to speak to other people. It's something that comes very naturally to me. And of
Right.
course, during the bear market, we had this amazing opportunity to focus on more educational content. I think that's what a lot of companies, or at least a lot of companies that want to do things the right way, that's what they did. Because during the bear market, there's not much else to do other than to understand the reason there's a bear market is because there's nothing much for people to incentivize people to stay, right? If they are only there for the money and there's no
Yeah.
money, yes, they'll leave. And so during the course of hosting the show, we are now on season 3. I think we are coming up to 50 episodes next week. What I've learned over this entire period is that if you think of NFTs as art or PFPs, uh, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, it's
Yeah.
early days. I think that there's going to be a lot that needs to be done because a lot of people still have this perception. And probably, I mean, we are not going to use the term NFTs. I mean, what does it mean? If I use the term NFT, if someone's heard it before, it's probably because they know, oh, NFTs were sold for millions of dollars and now they're worth nothing.
Hmm.
If I talk about a digital collectible, I don't think that's necessarily the term that we use because not all NFT utilities are digital collectibles. It's a type of utility.
Right.
And then, for the average person, if they want to learn a little bit more, and I say, okay, it's not an NFT, it's actually a non-fungible token. I mean, what does that mean? So I do think that in future we are not going to see the NFTs in the same way that we do now. The underlying technology like blockchain is probably going to be quite hidden. And
Hmm.
this is probably the key takeaway that I have personally from speaking to all of these incredible minds building these incredible solutions. I'm saying incredible solutions, but it will in many cases take years for those kind of solutions to hit mass adoption. So at this point, and this is what I can say about the state of NFTs right now, we are in a period of possibility. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of people working on really cool ideas, but whether
Yeah.
those ideas will get adopted, I think very much has to do with how much you need to understand Web3 or NFTs. If we look at Starbucks, if we look at Nike, I mean, there's a lot of big brands actually over the last, let's say, 2 years or so in the bear market that have started using NFTs and they've done it with success. I mean, Reddit had their avatars coming out, but you'll notice that they didn't focus on the Web3 aspect, on the NFT aspect. Because if you work in this industry, this stuff is cool to you. You want to tell everyone about it. You want to use these terms. It's cool. I mean, my show is called The Future of NFTs. What am I going to do if we no longer call it NFTs? But I think that really is the secret to NFT's eventual success is that we stop focusing on the technical aspects of it because most people don't understand it and they don't care. They just want something cool that works. And if they need to learn about Web3 and they need to learn about NFTs, then it's always going to be like this weird thing that we do here in the corner and the average person, won't get involved. So that's what I see for the next few years, is that NFTs are here to stay, but they'll probably become more and more invisible. And that's really cool. I look forward to that point. I'll have to change the name of the show, but but I'm not sure what to yet, so I've got time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an ever evolving space, and especially with NFTs, what you said, I think I was right there on the same boat. I did not understand the craze. I did not understand why like I understood on some level why cryptocurrencies and all of this was becoming big, earlier, but I couldn't see like a proper use case. And obviously that has changed drastically. There are so many use cases now for NFTs, and there are so many builders that are working. Like you mentioned, it still stands to be tested whether all of these solutions will actually make a mark. But there are so many solutions that are being built around this technology, which makes it very, very exciting.
And I think, just to highlight here, I think for most people, especially when these things are quite complex to understand, one of the most helpful things that you can do for yourself is to actually go on. So for example, our podcast, it happens live on Twitter Spaces every week, and then subsequently it's available as a podcast. So I would highly recommend that, even if you're not really someone who uses Twitter, LinkedIn also does the same thing, although it's not as active on LinkedIn. But there's a lot of opportunities where you can actually tune in live or record it if it's a pre-recorded podcast like this one that we're on. There's so many resources that you can get involved, either just from an audience, like just passively listening, or even ask questions, contribute to the conversation, because it's easy to get in the same room as people that are building things in this space. And I always tell people that I'm so, so fortunate because the lens through which I look at the world and I look at the future is very much colored by the fact that I am constantly speaking to startups in really early stages. So it doesn't mean that what they are building is the future, but I see so many different possibilities on a daily basis in terms of, oh, the future might look like this. Oh, it might look like that. So I think this informs your own worldview and also helps you to make decisions about your own life. And of course, then you start contributing to this future because there's so many different possible futures. We have to vote for these futures with our attention, right? So
Yeah,
the first step is to vote with your attention. If you're really into this, you can start voting with your action. But the only way that we can make different futures become reality is if people support that vision. And so if you are
absolutely.
confused by all of this stuff, or you don't know kind of where to go, what the next step is, just start tuning in to Twitter Spaces, to podcasts, because when you listen to people actively building right now, you get so many nuggets of wisdom that you wouldn't get by reading a book, by reading an article, because those are passive things in the sense, you are passively consuming them. They are locked in a particular time and space. I mean, it takes months for a book to come to fruition. By that time, the information's already outdated. When it comes to writing an article, there's only so much time that the writer or the journalist has to spend on this article. So the best way to learn is really to hear from people currently building. And of course, because you have access to them, you could even, follow them, start commenting on their posts, start engaging with them. That I found is, yes, it's a little more work, but it's probably going to give you the best indication of what some of these possible futures might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned your book as well, and I would love to know a little more about the book that you're working on. And when you mentioned that you'd be launching it at Token, 2049, right? And can you give us like a little sneak peek or a preview? And is there a way to perhaps pre-order it?
Yes, yes. So first of all, we had been talking about the book for quite some time. And this is because originally the idea was simply to focus on what was contained within the show. Speaking to people for an hour on a weekly basis, especially when it's conversations that are quite high level, quite insightful, looking towards the future. As I said, creating these new realms of possibility in people's minds. There's so much content rich material that you get. And so initially we were like, okay, we're going to just put a book together with the content that we have, and publish that. And then I thought about it and I was like, but if you're going to write a book anyway, if you're going to
Hmm.
go through all of that trouble, you might as well add a little bits and pieces for those people who don't necessarily understand what you're talking about. So maybe they don't know what NFTs are all about. So the book started growing and growing. And of course, when you have a busy schedule, then it's like, oh my God, okay, so that's on the to-do list, but we'll get
Yeah,
there. And
yeah.
so eventually what we've come up with, and I think it's very interesting because it very much speaks to where we are at on this technological adoption journey. So we'll have a Web2 version of the book, which is just, of course, the normal, you buy it on Amazon, and yes, you will be able to pre-order it. But then we also have the Web3 Collector's Edition version. Now,
Okay.
that will be an NFT. That's also where we will have the book launch in Dubai during Token 2049 is for the Collector's
Yeah.
Edition. And so the NFT will offer a different experience than simply buying the Web2 version. So if you have the NFT, you'll get the Web2 version for free. If you are simply buying the Web2 version, you will have the option if you are curious about, okay, you've been reading about NFTs, now you want to experience one, you will have the ability to get an NFT to enhance your book reading experience. But if you are simply happy with, having the hard copy version on your shelf or the ebook on your device, then you can do that too. And I think the reason that this is quite an interesting experiment is we have all of these amazing Web3 solutions, including NFTs. But then I've always wondered, and I wonder this actively throughout my working day, because there's so many companies that come up with, this is an NFT collection and this is our new NFT collection. But then because it has up until now been investment driven primarily. So if you buy an NFT, it's because someone, is going to make money out of it. NFTs have really in practice come to mean almost a fundraising vehicle. And so this is not the approach that we are taking whatsoever. For us, it's more of a A/B split test. How many people are going to go only for the Web2 version? How many people are going to go for the Web3 version? And I think that's quite valuable data that we need to be collecting as an industry.
Yeah, I think that will give you some brilliant insights. When you mentioned about the book and how it's been a work in progress, I totally feel
Absolutely.
you. Yeah, I've been working on two books, and one of them is actually ready. I just had to sort of go ahead and push it out, and it's about the when during the NFT bull run, so to say, all of these digital arts that did really splendidly well. So there's a collection of around that, and pretty much akin to your podcast, this podcast, I'm curating another book around that as well, because we're about to hit the 100 episode mark.
That is wonderful. Congratulations. And I'm very much looking forward to reading both of them. Yeah. And it's so enriching to be working on these projects, because what we are
Yeah,
doing is we are capturing a part of history, right? Like living
yeah,
history.
exactly. That is what makes it so exciting, right? These are real people who
Exactly.
are actually changing an industry, who are seeing it from its infancy while it's evolving and growing into something so much more mainstream.
Good times up ahead, but also hard work up ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I love speaking to fellow founders and in the space. There's always an insight there. And thank you so much for making the time, Nadja. But, I'll be amiss and if I did not ask you this one question before we kind of wrap this up, because we're almost out of time. This is something that I ask everybody who comes on the show. Because you were somebody who was working in the pharmaceutical space, which is primarily perhaps old tech and Web2, and you made a leap to Web3. What would be your suggestions for people? If somebody is perhaps working with the same dilemma and they are kind of struggling with the same dilemma, what will be your few suggestions for them to start living on blockchain?
I want to use an analogy. Let's say you have bad eyesight,
Hmm.
and you've only ever seen the world through bad eyes.
Hmm.
And then one day you get prescription lenses, whether glasses, whether contact lenses, and suddenly the world transforms right in front of your very eyes. The grass is literally so much greener because you can see it better. The buildings have much more detail on them. Before you could only see kind of faint outlines. So you would not know the possibilities that are within Web3 unless you actually put on those glasses. Now, how you do that will be different for everyone. There are a lot of opportunities to get involved. Of course, you will need to have enough time to devote to these things. You can get involved with DAOs. You can just join communities. I always recommend networking, speak to as many people as possible. because you actually, unless you have a very clear and firm idea of what your next step is going to be, and then, by the way, you are very lucky because most people are not that fortunate. They don't have that luxury at their disposal. I think most of us kind of fumble through the dark and, okay, what's the next step going to be? We'll wait for, the light to shine a little bit. And so it's a journey for sure, not a destination, right? Like, my favorite question that I always ask people is, how did you get into Web3? And you'll
Right.
never hear the same story twice. Like, I've
Yeah, that
asked
is true.
hundreds of people and you'll never get a repeat. Like, every story
Yeah,
will be different. So I can
absolutely.
promise
Yeah.
you, wherever you are right now, whatever you know, whatever you don't know, that is no deterrent for you to start getting involved. Because people think, oh, Web3 is all about the financial industry. Not for everyone. Web3 is all about technology, not for everyone. It's an industry. So, whatever you do right now, if you would like to continue doing the same, I mean, maybe not whatever you do. If you are doing something that it can be replicated in Web3, there will be a place for you. If what you are doing right now is very different from what you want to do, but you don't know what you want to do, start exploring, start slow. And then if you do want to start working in the industry, it's so easy to build up a portfolio based on the network that you have. Offer to help people. If you have skills that you think you want to start utilizing in this industry, start working with people. There are so many people that you can work with, so many different startups out there. Demonstrate what your value is. But if
Yeah.
you've ever tried to do this in another industry, I can promise you it's probably like 1,000 times easier here because we are very, very early. And so people here look for those star qualities in other people. What are those star qualities? People that can work with over a long time. Sustainability. So if you are the kind of person who wants to be in this industry, maybe not forever, maybe you're just trying it out, network as much as possible, educate yourself on the job. Don't feel like you need to get to a point of expertise. There's no person like that in this industry. This is a new industry that is evolving on a daily basis. No one knows everything. You don't have to know half of it. You need to know what you need to know, and either you already know what that is or you're going to figure it out, but just get started. Don't feel like there's, a finish line and once you get there you'll be ready. This is a very forgiving industry. It's a very welcoming industry. It's a very helpful industry. Of course, I can also say the opposite. I can also say all the bad things about the industry, and those are all true. But
Yeah.
from the perspective of, getting involved, it's really easy, really satisfying and rewarding. And I don't like making promises, but I can promise you that if you commit yourself to this industry, your life is not going to look the same again, for the better. That's almost a guarantee.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a rabbit hole, so to say. And once you jump down this rabbit hole, there is pretty much no coming back, and
Yeah,
it's
Alice
fast
Alice
and
does not want to wake up once she goes to
yeah,
Wonderland.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that is absolutely true. And the way you put it, I think this is something that I keep telling everybody that people have this perception, the deep-rooted perception. This is it is a space where only the tech heavy and the nerds, they kind of can make their presence known. And I feel that nothing can be further from the truth, because as you said, it's an industry. And if you have like a valuable skill set that you are bringing to a Web2 industry, maybe you can look at doing it in perhaps the decentralized space as well.
Or you can also completely change your career. That's also possible, because I want to
Absolutely.
just add this as a founder. When people are looking to hire people in this industry, they don't look
Hmm.
for years of experience, because there isn't, in most
There
cases, years
isn't,
of
yeah. It's
experience.
not possible, right?
So
This space is so
exactly. I mean,
dynamic.
I've
How will
I've
you get years
seen
of
some
experience?
job ads that are ridiculous where they ask for, like, I don't know, 15 years of Solidity experience, but Solidity has not existed for 15 years, so
Yeah, yeah.
so so definitely, if you are looking at opportunities. And I just to add to that, I think, we live in a very, very interesting time when it comes to the workforce.
Yeah.
Post COVID, work from home has become a reality for a lot of people. A lot of
Yes.
people who have never had that opportunity before. So it's now the time to really, I mean, and I think this started happening during COVID already. you need to start reevaluating your life, asking yourself if the career decisions that you made previously are still applicable. Of course, technology is accelerating at a highly accelerated pace at the moment, if we look at AI specifically. So there are going to be a lot of hard questions coming up. And just know that whatever, is your reality, if Web3 is something that you consider, definitely highly recommended to at least try it out. Or if not trying, then get involved just from an awareness perspective, just so you understand what the other options are that are out there. Maybe it's not the time for you now, maybe it's in the future, but the more you learn from a holistic perspective, as I said, not from articles on the internet, not from maybe a book that was written a year ago and is no longer applicable now, but really just learn and connect and grow alongside other people that are doing the same. That's probably like the best advice that I can give, that I learned the hard way, but that I wish that someone had told me and given me a step by step, okay, do this, do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is summarizing it very, very well, and I think a lot of people would be able to take heart and the leap here after listening to us talk. Once again, Nadja, thank you so much for doing this conversation. This has been such a wonderful conversation with so many insights about building, fundraising, and just how get being comfortable with the discomfiture of the space and still being able to grow.
Yeah, and thank you for all the very, very beautiful questions. I think, it's always so telling when I'm on a podcast and I know that the host is someone who cares about their audience. And I can very much tell from your questions what kind of actionable insights you would like for the audience. So I highly respect that. I think that the listeners of the show are very lucky to have you as their host, and I'm very honored to
Thank
have
you.
been here as a guest.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you once again, and I really hope that we can, find ways to work together in the future as well.
Absolutely looking forward to it. In this space, the luckiest thing is that you meet so many incredible people that
Yeah,
it's not easy to meet so many people that you genuinely like and would like to work with in other industries. So again, we are
yeah.
very fortunate to be here and to be making all of these connections. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to have met you and looking forward to exploring all of the possibilities in future.
Thank you so much once again.